Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Batra. We are up to Perek Chet Mishnah Gimel. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bat Miriam, Sason ben Rayin, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim Lechaim, v'derefua shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, betoch Shach Chulei Israel, and Achlama Mera ben Amin, Otzion Chai ben Dvorah. The Torah passage that deals with the order of inheritance is written in connection with the Torah's account of the claim made by the daughters of Tzlofchad for their father's estate when he died without sons. The Torah in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 27, states that Tzlofchad, son of Chefer of the tribe of Menashe, died without leaving any sons. His 5 daughters came to Moshe saying that their father's legacy within their family should not be lost just because he had died without male offspring. They asked to be named Tzlofchad's heirs. Moshe brought their claim before Hashem, who told Moshe that they were indeed the rightful heirs. The passage of inheritance appears in the Torah as part of Hashem's reply to their claim. The Mishnah discusses the different portions of inheritance that the daughters of Tzlofchad received. Benot Tzlofchad natlu shlosha chalakim benahala. The daughters of Tzlofchad received 3 portions in the land of Eretz Yisrael as a result of being named their father's rightful heirs. Chelek avien shaya im yotzei Mitzrayim. 1. They received the portion in the land that their father Tzlofchad himself was entitled to because he was one of those who left Egypt. Every Jewish male over the age of 20 that left Egypt was awarded a portion in Eretz Yisrael. When they died in the wilderness, they passed those portions to their heirs. There is a dispute in the Tanaim whether portions in the land of Eretz Yisrael were awarded to the generation that left Egypt, the generation that actually entered Eretz Yisrael, or both. The Tan of this Mishnah follows the first view. Since Tzlofchad's daughters were named his heirs, they inherited that portion of Eretz Yisrael. V'chelko im echad b'nichsei Chefer. 2, and they received Tzlofchad's share among his brothers in the estate of Chefer, their father's father. Chefer too was among those who left Egypt, and he too died in the wilderness. His portion was divided among his sons. Tzlofchad's share of that portion was given to his daughters, for they stood in his place to inherit along with the surviving sons. Like we learned in the previous Mishnah, the descendants of a son inherit in the place of that son. Therefore, Tzlofchad's daughters were entitled to receive whatever share in Chefer's estate that their father Tzlofchad would have received if he were still alive. They therefore received his share in Chefer's portion along their surviving uncles, Tzlofchad's brothers. V'shehaya bechor noten shnei chalakim. 3. Because Tzlofchad was the firstborn son of Chefer, he received a double share of Chefer's portion. Since Tzlofchad, as the Bechor, was entitled to a double portion of Chefer's estate, his daughters who stood in his place to inherit received that extra portion as well, just as he would have. The children of a Bechor who has died stand in his place to inherit a double portion in their grandfather's estate, even though they themselves are not firstborn, for it is as though their father inherits a double portion in the grave, and they in turn inherit it from him. Now, although the law is that a Bechor usually receives a double portion only in items that were actually in their father's physical possession when the father died, and Chefer died in the wilderness, portions in the land of Eretz Yisrael are the exception to this rule. Since Hashem himself promised Eretz Yisrael to the Jewish nation, each man who left Egypt was already considered to be in possession of his portion, and therefore Tzlofchad, and by extension his daughters, was entitled to a double share in it. Therefore, the daughters of Tzlofchad received a total of 3 portions in Eretz Yisrael, Tzlofchad's own portion in its entirety, and 2 shares in Chefer's portion. Now, it's clear from verses in Yoshua, in the book of Yoshua, that in truth, the daughters of Tzlofchad received 4 shares in Eretz Yisrael, because another of Tzlofchad's brothers died in the wilderness without any children. His portion was therefore divided among his brothers, and the share that would have gone to Tzlofchad was taken by his daughters. And the Mishnah mentions only 3 of the shares because each one teaches a different law. Number 1, the first Tzlofchad's portion teaches us that those who left Egypt were awarded portions in Eretz Yisrael. 2, the first share of Chefer's portion teaches that the daughters of a son stand in their father's place to inherit their grandfather along with his living brothers. And 3, the firstborn share of Chefer's portion teaches that portions in Eretz Yisrael were considered to be already in the possession of their owners, even in the wilderness. Mentioning the 4th share, however, would not have taught us any new law of inheritance, so the Tana did not speak of it. And that is that of Mishnah Gimel. Now, as we learned earlier in the chapter, children can inherit from both their fathers and their mothers. If the mother was married at the time of her death, the husband inherits her before her children. But in general, the Mishnah compares, and this Mishnah compares Mishnah Dalet, it compares inheriting from one's father to inheriting from one's mother, and identifies 2 laws that apply in one case but not the other. The position of a son as the first heir and a daughter as a second heir are the same with respect to both inheriting the father and inheriting the mother. Just as sons come before daughters to inherit their father's estate, sons come before daughters to inherit their mother's estate. The only difference between inheriting a father's estate and inheriting a mother's estate are that one, a firstborn son takes a double portion in the estate of his father, but he does not take a double portion in the estate of his mother. The law that a bechor, a firstborn son, receives a double portion, which was discussed in the previous Mishnah, applies only to a son who inherits his father. This is learned from the verse stated at the end of the Torah passage that discusses the double portion in Dvarim chapter 21 verse 17, Lo Mishpat Bechorah, which is expounded to mean regarding him, the father, the right of the firstborn applies, but not regarding the estate of a mother. A firstborn daughter does not receive a double portion in either her father's or her mother's estate, even when there are no sons and the daughters are the sole heirs. This is learned from the fact that the Torah passage that teaches the law of the double portion speaks of a situation where the wife bore sons as opposed to children. Then, and two minor daughters are supported from the estate of the deceased father until they become adults or are married, but they do not receive such support from the estate of the deceased mother. Although sons inherit before daughters, one of the stipulations of the Ketubah agreement that a man accepts upon himself when he marries is that he agrees to provide support from his estate after his death for any daughters that he will have with his wife until they marry or become adults. Therefore, when the father dies, money from his estate is set aside for this before the sons receive their inheritance. The Mishnah teaches that this applies only to a father's estate. A mother does not sign a Ketubah agreement, and therefore support for her daughters is not provided from her estate if she dies. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.